And also, aren't all conspiracy theories baseless and they wouldn't be conspiracy theories? Anyway.
No. What? No.
Just because I'm paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get me.
From New York Times Opinion, I'm Michelle Cottle.
I'm Ross Douthat.
I'm Carlos Lozada.
And I'm Lydia Polgreen.
And this is Matter of Opinion. Guys, we are reunited this week.
Aw, it's so nice to be back.
And it feels so
Very
good.
nice to have you back, Lydia.
Little backup music, please. Lydia, we have missed you as you have been focusing on your reporting.
Oh, I'm so thrilled
Welcome
to be here
back,
with
Lydia.
you all.
I think Lydia prefers to call it her reportage. Michelle, not mere reporting.
Wow.
fancy.
Way to other me,
Oh.
Ross.
Right off the bat.
Just-
Right off the bat.
Ross is so sophisticated.
Yeah.
Sophistication. What do you mean? It's like my columns are my oeuvre, and your reporting is your reportage. I don't know what you mean.
Oh, my God.
See, this is what I've been missing, guys.
Are you already sorry that you're back with us, Lydia?
Absolutely not. It's like slipping into a warm bath.
Moving right along.
But it's not water. It's not water. Yeah.
Ew.
What's wrong with you?
Carlos.
Stop. Okay, we're going to ignore Carlos and
As
just
usual.
jump right into the big questions bubbling beneath the news this week, which leads us today to Springfield, Ohio. We're going to unpack why this particular corner of the heartland has become the 2024 election's avatar for a much bigger debate over immigration. But first, we got to start with what actually happened to put the spotlight on Springfield. Carlos, you want to help us set this table, please?
I'll get us started, but I'll need help along the way because there are many detours on the way to Springfield. Just take I-70 west from Columbus for about 50 miles and you'll get there.
Did you MapQuest this?
My wife's from Ohio. I know something about the terrain. Basically, over the last several decades, it's gone through some hard times, losing a lot of manufacturing jobs, a good chunk of its population. City leaders made a big push to attract businesses. And in part as a result, we've also seen a big influx of immigrants, particularly Haitian immigrants, attracted to new job opportunities and also the low cost of living. So somewhere around, I don't know, between 12 and 20,000 Haitians came to Springfield over the last, 3 or 4 years, a lot of them under temporary protective status, given the turmoil and upheaval in Haiti. They filled jobs, they boosted the local economy, but they also put a strain on the housing market, on schools, on the healthcare system. Then, a little over a year ago, a school bus was hit by a Haitian driver in a minivan, killing an 11-year-old boy named Aiden Clark. And that prompted a sort of public outcry and the kind of bubbling to the surface of resentments that had been simmering toward the Haitian population. And that was the beginning of how this town was thrust into the 2024 presidential campaign. Who wants to pick up, the politics of the story that followed?
I can try, and then you guys can correct me. Basically, there's generally been a really big surge of migration to the United States under the Biden administration. And we've done an episode of this show about some of the strains that Carlos is talking about affecting blue cities, places like New York and Chicago feeling overwhelmed. But obviously, a city in Ohio, in sort of reddish America, is a better example, I think, in certain ways, for the Trump-Vance narrative of the problems of Biden administration immigration policy. And so you've had, I think, for a while, in conservative circles, places like Springfield, there are a few other examples cited as case studies in too much immigration, too fast, overwhelming a community. And Vance himself, I think, started talking about Springfield earlier this summer. And then at a certain point, just before the debate, there had been rumors, stories, Facebook memes alleging that Haitian immigrants had captured and eaten people's pets, cats specifically. Vance mentioned these rumors, and then Trump turned the dial to 11 at the debate, and that became the story that then made Springfield the focus of American political discourse right now, complete with bomb threats, some of which, according to Mike DeWine, the governor of Ohio, are originating from foreign countries. specifically a foreign country he says he doesn't want to name, which is itself interesting. The Wall Street Journal has a pretty good story, I think, looking at all of this, where it actually digs into the police report that the Vance campaign supplied to them to validate the allegations about kidnapped cats, and the Wall Street Journal reporter tracked down the woman who had made the police report and discovered that she had Haitian neighbors, but her cat had been found and she had apologized to them. So that's, I think, where we are right now.
So we can expect the campaign to retract it all, right? Okay, that feels like a lot.
It's a lot.
Well, Vance didn't just mention the rumors, as you put it, Ross. Vance has done his best to spread them, encouraging patriots to keep the cat memes flowing, even when faced with the sort of likelihood that this part of the story was not true.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, that Wall Street Journal report that you cited, and I mean, I can't believe that 3 Wall Street Journal reporters do a deep dive investigation into
Total respect.
Total respect. But it really does say something about our body politic that this deep investigative report is required to figure out where Mittens the kitten, or whatever this cat's name, was in the basement.
That is the report, yes.
But I think that there are a couple of things that are incredibly just irresponsible. I mean, there are many things that are irresponsible in this, but a couple of things that I think really need to be hung around JD Vance's neck. One is that the Wall Street Journal reported when a Vance staffer had called the Springfield city manager to check on this rumor, if it was true, that staffer was told in no uncertain terms, absolutely not, there's no evidence to support this, and Vance blasted away anyway. And then in an interview on CNN, he says, basically, like, the truth doesn't really matter. Quote, if I have to create stories so that the American media actually pays attention to the suffering of the American people, then that's what I'm going to do. And so it's this embrace of a kind of truthiness. Oh, you guys remember truthiness? That to me is really, really disgusting.
In the second interview, I think if you look at the full interview, he's not saying, I am making up stories to get you to pay attention to this. I think he's saying, I am creating stories in the sense of creating essentially the way you create a story by having reporters cover it. I don't think he is
lying?
Confessing. I'm just saying he is not
by
confessing.
Spreading things that you know not to be true, and that your staff has confirmed are baseless. I mean, I'm not sure what sort of fine distinction one can make really about what creating a story means.
The distinction that I'm making is that he is not confessing in that interview.
Oh, no, he never confesses.
To making up stories.
No.
I completely agree that the use of this story by the whole campaign, Vance included, has been totally irresponsible. I'm just saying there have been people saying about that interview, this is the confession where he says, I knew this isn't true and I did it anyway. That's not what he's saying. He's saying, we got these reports. I think they might be true and I have no problem using this to get the media to pay attention to the larger problems in Springfield. But I completely agree about the fundamental irresponsibility.
Now, Lydia, you wrote a really thoughtful, really personal column about why this particular lie, amid so many, hits so hard and is so insidious. So you want to tell us why you feel like this is striking such a chord?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a blunderbuss of disgusting stuff that's always coming at us, particularly from Trump, although I definitely don't want to let Vance off the hook, who I think is in many ways the author and prime mover behind this. And we should talk about whether he gets the same kind of free pass that Trump has traditionally gotten, or hand-waving that Trump has traditionally gotten as just being a sui generis figure. But putting all that aside, when I heard this, what really I think can only be called a slur against the Haitian people living in Springfield, it really sort of brought to mind my own experiences as a child of an immigrant being made fun of over food. And then also just thinking about what it is about this particular allegation that hits so hard. And I was thinking about how food as a symbol is something that connects people and says a lot about our identity. Pets are too. And it's in this unholy fusing of the two, aimed at this particular group. Haitians, I think, throughout American history have played a very ugly role as a kind of universal boogeyman. they're unwanted as migrants, they're carriers of disease. I mean, this was another part of JD Vance's allegation, that they were bringing communicable diseases. I've seen no evidence at all that there has been some rise in communicable diseases in this community that coincides with the arrival of these immigrants. And it really felt to me like something akin to a blood libel. Saying that someone is eating pets is like, eating a quasi-family member. It just felt like a new low. So I wrote about that. And I think we've been having all these conversations about immigration and who's wanted and who's unwanted and what the American future looks like. And it just filled me with so much despair to see this play out day after day in the news cycle. It's a disgusting slur. And, I don't think any of us should tolerate it.
Wasn't Haiti one of Trump's noted shithole countries that he talked about?
It indeed was. It indeed was. And there's been a bipartisan tradition of demonizing Haitians throughout American history and certainly over the past few decades.
Your column, Lydia, made me think about and revisit some of the moments in our political rhetoric about immigration in recent years that hit me particularly hard. This is weird. Like, I go back to the very first one. Was it June 2015 when Trump gives his speech announcing that he's running for president? And that was when he infamously referred to Mexican immigrants as criminals and rapists. And some he supposes are okay. But there was one moment in those remarks right at the beginning that really, really struck me when he said, when Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best. And the verb sending really, really got to me because it just robs me of any sort of agency, any power in coming here, right? Like no one sent me. My father made the decision for us to come when I was a child. We returned to Peru, and then later I chose to return and make this home.
And thank God you did.
And thank you. And sending, that's sending. Just as something that has always cut particularly deep for me, because it just makes me feel like I'm viewed as a sort of pawn, as someone who has no decision-making power over my life. But anyway, your column in part prompted me to think more deeply about particular instances, and that's just one that, even though it was the very first, and there's been a cumulative effect here, that one really struck me.
Yeah, I definitely relate to that.
Well, your point there, Carlos, doesn't that feed into this larger storyline that this is all some conspiracy about Democrats are trying to fly in immigrants so that they can somehow take over the political system, and the countries where the immigrants are coming from are trying to empty out their insane asylums and prisons? It depersonalizes this and turns it into some grand chess game by the powers that be, which feels like another way to just freak people out.
But I mean, it is part of a policy structure of choices by the Biden administration, right?
You mean like Haitian immigrants receiving temporary protected status?
Well, that specifically, yes. But if you look at the case studies where different issues have made the pace of immigration politically controversial over the last few years, and again, they range from places like Springfield, Ohio, which is a very specific kind of situation where you have some extremely large number of immigrants arriving in a relatively short amount of time, to situations like what you have in Chicago and New York, where liberal cities pronounce themselves overwhelmed. All of those are downstream of specific policy choices that the Biden administration made in its first year in office. It is a conspiracy theory to say the Biden administration sat down and, cackling with glee, plotted the ruin of America. That is true. That is a conspiracy theory. But it is actually a policy debate about whether immigration policy in the Biden era has gone well, that is connected to big picture choices that the White House made. I think that's important because there is just a tendency, I think, among people who are completely understandably sympathetic to immigrants to paint immigration as this sort of process that's like the seas and the tides that happens in a realm removed from politics, and then it gets politicized by bad people, which it certainly does. But it is part of a political and policy realm.
No, it absolutely is. And I think that the Biden administration made choices to, in the aftermath of the pandemic in particular, undo and change many of the policies that the Trump administration had engaged in. And you can believe it or not, but Secretary Mayorkas was on our colleague Ezra Klein's show and talked about what the administration's record is and, the sort of pent-up demand for migration and expectations at the border and things like that, and how we ended up with this significant surge post-pandemic. And you can believe it or not, I'm guessing that Ross is fairly skeptical about it. That's fine. He's entitled to be. But the reality is that, yes, there are policy choices that are made and, they can lead to more or less migration. But the other reality is that there has been no movement at all on any kind of border policy change. This is a fight that's been going on for a very, very long time. And what the Harris administration will say is, we agreed to the harshest bipartisan border bill that could exist.
Excuse me, Lydia. Which administration will say?
Oh, yeah, the Harris administration.
She just slipped that in there.
What the Harris campaign would say is that they've agreed to this bipartisan bill that is much harsher than anything Democrats have ever considered voting for. And it was scuttled on Trump's behalf because Republicans love to run on migration chaos, and solving it is bad for them politically. Raising these things is something that they can continue to profit from, and they're never held accountable in actually having to govern and do anything about it. So that's certainly how I see the policy landscape.
Right.
All right, let's pause here for a second. When we come back, we'll take a closer look at the policy debate lurking beneath this whole Springfield mess. Stay with us. Okay, guys. So I think there's no question the Biden administration was slow in cracking down on the border.
Absolutely.
But it is also absolutely true that Republicans love demagoguing this issue, even before Trump, and that he has just doubled down on that.
Yes, and we all watched the debate, and Trump took immigration, one of his most advantageous issues, and made his own choice to make it a debate about pet eating. And that is 100% on Trump, and that is who Trump is, and that is what you get. And I think to the question about Vance earlier, I think Vance isn't like Trump. And there's a reason that his campaign is supplying the basis for the claims to the Wall Street Journal, which then can be investigated.
And debunked.
And debunked, right? And that's sort of the normal range of American politics. Yeah, Trump gets I think it's effectively an inappropriate pass for being just a bullshit artist in a way that his running mate rightly does not. I just want to stress again this idea that poor Biden, he was a little slow to deal with this, and then the Republicans started demagoguing it. I'm looking at the Wall Street Journal's chart on net immigration to the U.S. over the last 25 years. And in no presidency, Republican or Democrat, does it break 2 million per year average. And under Trump, when Trump was actually president, true to Trump's promises, agree with them or disagree with them, it went down. Under Biden, it rapidly goes to 2.75 million, then 3.25 million, and now there seems to be some crackdown happening. This is a big, big change. And everything that we're talking about, again, with all these issues, and I want to say again, these are blue state issues as well as red state issues, is downstream of a big change at the border. And that, I think, is just important context for listeners who have again, completely justifiable reaction to how Trump is campaigning on this.
Which is why Kamala Harris has such a hard time addressing this in the debate. I mean, she was asked point blank, why'd you guys wait so long? Weren't these trends sort of ever present throughout this administration? And she just didn't engage on that at all, right? And for a long time, or at least for the last several years, we've been largely talking about immigration as a border issue. We measure border crossings and interactions with the Border Patrol as proxies for how it's going. But of course, immigration is about so much more than the border, right? It's about communities across the country being affected by immigration, being transformed, being enriched by immigration, being complicated by immigration. So I think the Trump campaign has made that pivot much more clearly. And that's why the biggest immigration story about the 2024 campaign is not about something happening, on the Rio Grande. It's something happening in Springfield, Ohio. The notion that the immigration debate has to be about so much more than the border, I think, is incredibly important.
I think that, just zooming out, it's important to think about what are we talking about when we talk about immigration and what is this panic actually about? To me, this panic about immigration is really a panic about the future and about what progress will look like. There was this extraordinary quote from JD Vance where he said, if the path to prosperity was flooding your nation with low-wage immigrants, then Springfield, Ohio would be the most prosperous city in the world. America would be the most prosperous country in the world because Kamala Harris has flooded the country with 25 million illegal aliens. I've never met JD Vance. I'm reliably told that he's an extremely intelligent person. So I assume that he's aware that the United States is, in fact, the most prosperous country in the world. And I think that the tragedy of the focus on a town like Springfield, Ohio, is that the initial viral videos that we saw were people who were angry because they felt that they had to wait too long to, get their doctor's appointment at the local Medicaid clinic, or their rent was going up, or things like that. But, as more reporting has come out from Springfield, there are all of these other effects. Property prices have risen, although if you look at actually the data, the property prices have risen in a way that is not that different from what's happened in the broader country. Other indicators do not seem particularly out of whack. But this seems like a sudden shock of what can only be called prosperity. It has affected some people negatively as these things happen, but that's a result of our kind of broad-based failure as a country to anticipate and build for the future. And so I'd like to think that being a place that was forgotten and left behind, where people coming with fresh eyes see opportunity to build something new and better, and who want to come and be part of that community and build it together with the people who are there, can only be positive and is just part of what America's story has always been.
I mean, I think you can see what I would take to be the Vance goal actually in some of the optimistic and positive comments that have come out of Springfield, Ohio, particularly the comments that a lot of people have cited from a factory owner who basically said something to the effect of, it's really great to have these immigrants here because they show up for work on time. I'm paraphrasing here, by the way. They don't have drug problems. They're better workers than the workforce we had available to us already. And I think Vance said something basically like this to me in the interview that I did with him, that he sees himself and conservative politics more generally as needing to stand up for the interests of the workers who that factory owner is essentially talking down and dismissing.
Who Vance himself talked down and dismissed in his book, as we all remember.
In Hillbillyology, absolutely.
Those lazy, drug-addled people, his kin.
Yes, and he has pivoted and decided that he is their champion against an economy that would prefer to employ people under temporary protected status rather than them because they're addicted to fentanyl or something. And I think I'm closer to you, Lydia, in certain ways, in that I think there's a lot of places in America in an era of dun-dun-dun, falling birth rates and demographic decline.
Everybody drink.
They're not going to make it unless people move there from outside. And I think the pace at which immigration is happening in some of these places is reckless and a big policy mistake. But having some Haitians move to a small city in Ohio, you're going to have that. And it's good. But I also see why, if you see yourself as a representative of the white working class of Springfield, Ohio, that feels abandoned and ignored in its social disarray, it's a little much to have people say, good news. You're not working in the factories anymore. We haven't fixed your fentanyl problem, but we've got these Haitians and they're great workers. Like, you have to be able to see why that's not an uncomplicated story of good news.
It's not an uncomplicated story of good news. And in fact, I think that there are many different approaches that different governments have taken to managing these kinds of problems. And, we have a fundamentally dysfunctional government. We have divided government. Nobody has any incentive. The Republicans certainly don't have any incentive under a Democratic president to make any improvements on this. But, Turkey has taken in millions and millions and millions of Syrian refugees. They have very strict rules about where they can settle and how many can go to any given city, and I think has had lots of complicated knock-on effects. But if you had a government that was actually exercising real power and setting policy, I think that there could be management of this problem. But it's pretty rich to me that this sort of quote-unquote chaos should be laid at the feet of the Biden administration when we have just total gridlock. This is a bipartisan failure.
Well, but I mean, if you go back to the world of liberal politics 3 or 4 years ago, and I know these are not the stances that the Harris campaign is taking at the moment, but the stance of liberalism in 2019 and 2020 was not, we need to have a really careful managed policy of making sure that we don't have too many immigrants coming here and coming there because it can create problems. The stance back then was we should not be enforcing the border in any kind of heavy-duty way. That was the stance. That was the consensus.
No. That was not
They
the
all
stance.
raised their hands supporting that idea. So
Right, that we should decriminalize border crossings and have more immigration towards some upper limit that was never defined. And I think if you want to criticize Republicans for practicing gridlock, that's a fair criticism, but you have to recognize that parts of this policy are what progressives wanted to happen, right? Like lots of people coming to the United States to make a better life for high-minded reasons. That was the policy goal.
It's been a successful formula for America for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
No, I mean, I was just going to say...
No, see, it's what you're in favor of it. Yes, I'm... Anyway, go on, Carlos.
I have no problem. I have no problem with JD Vance wanting to, raise awareness of the difficulties that come when a small town experiences a big and rapid influx of newcomers, even setting aside the hypocrisy of the obstructionism of Republicans and laying it at the feet of the administration that is in office is absolutely legitimate. I don't have a problem with that. I do have a problem with his arguing that the best way to spread this awareness about a real issue is by lying about it in a manner that dehumanizes the people involved. His argument is basically, well, people are saying. It's a very Trumpy kind of way to address it.
He's a very fast learner in that way.
So keep the cat memes flowing. What does that tell me? That tells me that he's not just interested in talking about the economic and cultural challenges that migration poses to the native population in Ohio. He's also interested in painting immigrants as terrible, barbaric people. Maybe he doesn't really think that. I don't know. Maybe he feels he has to because he's part of the Trump campaign now, and that's what his boss has always done. But those two things are happening at the same time.
And then this smells to me like the election fraud thing. Well, a lot of people think the election was stolen. Why do a lot of people think the election was stolen? Because the president at the time told them it was and did his best to send his people out there to spread all these irresponsible rumors. So that just doesn't wash. I mean, you can defend these guys however you want to, but when they have had people tell them it's not true and they continue to spread it.
Well, no, but in this, I think this is a different sort of case. Donald Trump, the reason people were talking about this rumor is that people were sharing it at town hall meetings in this town. You can watch the video. That's where some of this comes from. It's not that Trump made this up and then his followers imitated them.
I love it when we get to parse the different ways that Trump spreads incredibly dangerous lies. That's my favorite part of this particular political era. All right, so I think we can all agree that the immigration debate today is an extremely sad and sorry place. So where do we all think it should be? Where should this be going?
What I would love is for some leader somewhere in the United States would be great, perhaps somewhere else in the globe, to unfurl some sort of story about the future of human progress and flourishing that helps us out of this zero-sum, extremely short-thinking politics and policy cul-de-sac that we seem to be stuck in. I don't quite share Ross's concerns about birth rates, but I'm conscious of the distribution of birth rates. And I think that one of the fundamental mistakes that those of us who live in the rich world are making is that we assume that people from the poor world will always want to come here, and they'll come here on the terms that we want them, and that we won't have to compete for those people, that we're not going to be in a pitched competition with China, with Mexico, with all these countries that have falling birth rates, is, I think, just fallacy. So I think I would love to have someone present a vision of the movement of people, of human talent around the globe that we can all live with and get behind and reinforce our societies.
Ross, you're smiling.
I mean, it's just, I just completely disagree. I think that it's actually the opposite, that it is guaranteed, all but guaranteed, that the United States for the next 50 years is going to remain the number one, by far, destination of choice for people from all around the globe. And I think this process will be accelerated by the birth dearth issues that I'm always talking about, because those will encourage talented people to want to leave societies that are slowly fading and dying out. There's a really good essay in the left-wing magazine, The Baffler, about depopulation in the Balkans and how all these places where, for hundreds of years people fought over this land, now people are just leaving. And they're going to Western Europe. People want to go to Western Europe too, but people are going to want to come to America. And I think I have more sympathy than I used to in certain ways with the position that I was critiquing earlier in this show, right? The idea that it's tidal, that it's like beyond policy control. It's not beyond policy control, but there has to be a form of management that falls somewhere in between Donald Trump talking about cats and dogs being eaten and what the Biden administration recklessly did in its first year in office. Somewhere between those two lies the stable policy for dealing with a long-term movement of people to the United States.
Carlos, thoughts, concerns, comments?
You want me to come up with the solution to America's immigration problem?
I would like you to give me that happy middle.
Is that
it's not the middle. I've abandoned all kinds of far right territory in my answer. We're shifting leftward.
So, okay, I have no idea what the proper model for immigration in the United States should be. But given the particular system of democracy, system of government that we have, which is about reaching accommodation among competing groups and ideas, it needs to be something that can be legislated, not just introduced and then dismantled by executive order every 4 years.
Oh my God, you're looking to Congress?
So, Ross, your former co-author, Reihan Salam, wrote a book a few years ago, a very dramatic title called Melting Pot or Civil War, ? In which he tried to propose that sort of accommodation. For him, that halfway point was a system that gives preference to better educated, higher skilled immigrants rather than privileging family ties. But it also included a one-time amnesty to long-time undocumented immigrants and stronger border enforcement. He thought this could create a new sort of middle-class melting pot. Now, politically, that kind of proposal gives everyone something to hate, but I appreciate the effort that he made with an idea like that. Building a multiracial, multicultural democracy is super hard. People point to the immigrant tradition, as Lydia has, and insist that, we're better than what we are now. But we always haven't been. The scapegoating, marginalizing, dehumanizing, that's part of the tradition too. Like every immigrant finds new obstacles to belonging, and every generation of Americans finds new people to mistrust. At the same time, I think anyone who wants America to be great should take some pride in the United States being the place where people come to make those dreams of opportunity and safety come true. America is aspirational. It always will be, both for those who are here and for those who come here. Sorry. Soapbox over.
That's last word.
All right, Carlos. For now, we're going to leave it there. Everyone take a breath. And when we come back, somebody's getting hot or cold. All righty, campers. It is hot cold time. Who's got one for us this week?
It's me. I'm the problem. It's me.
Well, we knew that.
Well, no, I am the problem because I keep having things that I am hot to talk about but have ambiguous feelings about. And so the latest is Chimp Crazy, the documentary on HBO.
Oh, Lordy.
By the filmmaker who made Tiger King, right?
Talk to me.
And it's about, as the title suggests, people who keep chimps in their homes. It mostly focuses on a all-American character named Tanya Haddix, who has a bunch of chimps and ends up essentially concealing one in her basement after a lawsuit forces her to give the others up. And that's all quite fascinating. The filmmaker, because he made Tiger King, has such a bad reputation in the world of exotic pet ownership that he has to hire a second director. And there's a lot of really thorny ethical issues involved. So all of that, I guess, I'm hot on.
Wait, what are you hot on?
The show is interesting.
Okay.
It's good,
Okay.
except that it also includes, at periodic moments, footage and accounts of chimp attacks on humans. And that stuff is the worst. And I was really mad at my wife for making me watch that part. And I'm very cold. I'm cold on chimps attacking humans. Very, very cold. So that's it. That's what I've got.
Wow.
I've just been scrolling through my phone because I was trying to find a photograph from a reporting trip that I took to Gabon, which is a country in Central Africa. And I was reporting in part on the bushmeat trade. And there's a photograph of me holding a baby chimp in a diaper on my hip. And I look really, really terrified, in part because the woman that I was interviewing was missing a couple of fingers. And she explained to me that she had lost those fingers in a previous chimp-related situation.
Yes.
And
chimp-related situation?
Yeah, I mean, these are terrifying beasts. They are absolutely terrifying beasts, and they will rip your face off. They will. I couldn't find the photo, but I'll send it to our group text later.
Real dark.
But it's
it's real.
It's very dark.
It's real dark in the midst of a documentary that generally has a kind of Curious Americana feel to it. It's like Curious Americana. Chimp ate someone's face.
I am sorry, but Americans really need to get over their fascination with exotic pets, like the pythons and the chimpanzees and the big cats. I was just get yourself a nice Maltese or a Great Dane or what. Just stop it.
We're really bringing this full circle.
What would be really relevant right now is the 1990s rom-com, The Truth About Cats and Dogs. That's which.
All right,
that's it. We're leaving.
All right, that's
we
it.
need to shut this down. We need to shut this down.
We're shutting it down. I'll see you next week, though.
All right.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
See ya.
Thanks for joining us today. If you have a question or want to share your thoughts, send us a voicemail by calling 212-556-7440 or email us at matterofopinion@nytimes.com. We might just share it in an upcoming episode. Matter of Opinion is produced by Sophia Alvarez-Boyd, Phoebe Lett, and Andrea Betanzos. It's edited by Jordana Hochman. Our fact-check team is Kate Sinclair, Mary Marge Locker, and Michelle Harris. Original music by Isaac Jones, Efim Shapiro, Carol Sabaro, and Pat McCusker. Mixing by Pat McCusker. Audience strategy by Shannon Busta and Christina Samuelewski. Our executive producer is Annie Rose Strasser. That got real weird.
That's how it was to watch the show.